Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I'm one of your co-hosts, Rico Borrego.
I am your other co-host, Tony Borrego.
And this is the podcast known as Relatively Sound, where if you just listen to our most recent episode, you'll know exactly what we're doing today. Today, we are finishing up this month's album for album series, and we are joined again by my friend, Chris Antonucci. Chris, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
We're doing great. We had a great time discussing the Beach Boys in our last episode. And if you listen to the last episode, you'll know that Chris and I share a lot of the same music. We listen to a lot of the same music. And Tom Petty was one of the artists that I kind of helped Chris get into. And he's gotten me into a lot of bands as well, Springsteen and whatnot. And for this last album for album episode for the month, we decided to give Tony his first full Tom Petty album, which is Heart Promises, the band's fourth studio album released in 1981. And we already kind of talked about in the last episode our background with Petty. But I will ask Tony what his background is, because out of the three of us, he's the one that knows Petty the least.
Yeah, for sure. My background is it's kind of hard to pinpoint. It just was growing up and hearing Petty on the radio, and our parents liked Petty. I mean, who doesn't like Petty at least a little bit? But otherwise, everything I've heard beyond just the big singles would just be anything that Rico has shown me. Rico and I have played You and I Will Meet Again, and that was one I actually really enjoyed. And yeah, I mean, I really appreciate Petty's work. I think he's a very talented musician. I mean, how could you not? Massive respect for him. But it was cool to actually finally sit down and listen to a full record.
Yes, and going into this album, you actually knew a couple more songs than I realized you did. Obviously, you knew the album opener, The Waiting. You and I have actually covered that on many occasions.
Yes.
And for some reason, you also knew Night Watchman, which still surprises me.
I feel like I've heard that song many times. I don't think this is a song out of the ordinary to have
But
heard.
it wasn't it's weird. I don't think it was a single. So
I feel like I've heard it on the radio, though.
Yeah, that's what you told me. And that's what I think you even said our mom said, too. But I don't know. Because I don't know where you heard Night Watchman. But other than those two songs, you didn't know anything else on the album, right?
I don't think so.
I mean,
maybe a few of the songs maybe sounded a little familiar, but not enough to actually have known them and known how they went.
Yeah. And then when it comes to this album, unlike the Beach Boys album, there's not a whole lot of background that really needs to go into it, other than, I mean, what do you think, Chris? The only main thing we should probably mention is this followed Damn the Torpedoes, which was not, I wouldn't call his breakout album, because they had singles on their first two albums, but that was I would say up to that point, their biggest album, right?
Oh, easily. It was. They did have the hits like American Girl, Breakdown, Need to Know, Listen to Her Heart. But yeah, you're right with Damn the Torpedoes. It was definitely their breakout album. I mean, debut I like a lot, especially over You're Gonna Get It. But yeah, Damn the Torpedoes was just like a sound of a pissed off man, basically, and band because of the whole label situation at the time.
Yeah, which we Tony, for reference, I mean, Chris can let us know if this is a decent comparison. I kind of brought up Tony to speed when we did the Bruce episode on Darkness on the Edge of Town, because kind of a similar situation with his manager at the time. And
right.
So Tony, take that kind of concept, but with Petty's previous album, Damn the Torpedoes. So when you get to Hard Promises, I feel like for the most part, he had more of a say. And the only thing that he really had an issue with was, I guess the record label was arguing with the price of the album.
Yes, that was a main thing about this album. I don't know if I can't remember if he threatened to withhold the album, but they wanted to, I guess at the time, when this was recorded. It was 80 1980 81. So like the country was in like a recession at the time. So but the label wanted to do MCA, which was his their distributor, but they were on Backstreet Records. So I guess MCA wanted to raise the price $1 from 8.98 and give it like the superstar pricing of 9.98 for like the bigger artists. And Petty, being true to himself and his beliefs, like he said, no, you're not doing that. You're not going to raise the price and charge, my fans more for this album. So they
which
argued about that.
which is like looking at that today, like no one would turn a blind eye if an album was, raised by a single dollar, right? Like, I mean, look
Yeah.
at like ticket prices today. Like, I don't know, Petty was alive today and saw the whole thing with like Taylor Swift and even Bruce with like
Oh,
their Ticketmaster, like, oh
yeah.
man, like, but yeah, so that, I mean, that was like the main storyline with this album. And I think the album was delayed because of that, but um
Yeah. I guess
I,
he even like jokingly said, like, thought of naming it 8.98.
which that would have been hilarious actually.
But it's just
Uh
like, it's who he was. Like, even going back to the Damn the Torpedoes and that whole label switch, I think, because I forgot what label he was on. I think it was like the Denny Cordell label, but I think MCA had bought it, and somehow like he didn't have a say in it. So um basically the short thing is like during the sessions for Damn the Torpedoes, after they were done, I guess Jimmy Iovine, the producer, they had someone take the tapes from the sessions with them and hide it. And I guess Petty didn't want to know where the tapes were located in case in court they asked him where it was. So he just so like yeah, he could answer that he truly didn't know where the tapes were. And that's how like part of what got that album recorded.
Wow.
yeah. And Chris and I would definitely both recommend the documentary Running Down a Dream, which is at least where I learned all that information from.
Me too.
Fantastic documentary. Long, but I
Even
mean,
the classic albums episode of Damn the Torpedoes itself.
yeah, that's great too. Yeah.
And
Um,
I think there was a story too, like during those during that lawsuit for when the label was switched. I guess like he happened like pull out a knife and started like cleaning his fingernails, and
oh yeah, I remember
it
that.
was like he kind of scared off the lawyers a little bit. And I think another time like someone um it might not have been in during that, but it was like because when they came up it was also around when the punk scene starting as well. And what do you say, like I don't know if he like said something like he'll kill you if you like call him a punk or something.
Yeah. I think that's right. Yeah, it's I feel like watching that documentary, both of them really helps like put into perspective like the type of person Petty was, like you were saying, and it makes me appreciate the music even more so than I already had.
Yeah, and just loving them even more like after every time you watch it.
Yeah, and the only reason I didn't give Tony Damn the Torpedoes is because, like we had just talked about, he knows like half the album because half the album is almost like a greatest hits album.
Yeah,
Because
So
what it has like Refugee, Here Comes My Girl, right?
even the losers.
don't do me
Okay,
like
yeah.
that.
Yeah, 'cause that's 4 songs right there that I'm very familiar with.
But I think you know some of the deep cuts. Like I think you and I talked about like Century City before and stuff.
I do know that one, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that one
So
I think was about the lawsuit, which was
yeah,
in Century City.
yeah, specifically, yeah.
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
So one of the reasons I thought Hard Promises was one, it comes right after Damn to Torpedoes.
Mhm.
It's also just a personal favorite of mine. I probably rank it right below Wildflowers, which to me is his like just like
Easily his greatest work.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I think a lot of Petty fans, especially like hardcore Petty fans like ourselves, would agree. Like Wildflowers is like arguably his best, even if you don't find it your personal favorite. but it
Right.
happens to also be my personal favorite. And like Chris had actually mentioned off the air, like probably Baby Steps with Tony with Petty is good. So giving him a smaller album as opposed to something as dense as Wildflowers is probably the best route to go.
Hmm. I mean, you could
Um,
also just go back and start at the beginning too to hear
the
um
progression, yeah,
progression and growth.
yeah. Tony, what did you think after like a first listen or two? How did this album sound to you?
So to me, I mean, of course, when we, hear these albums for album, you try to come in with kind of with no expectations and whatnot, just take the album for what it is. And I was a little bit disappointed when I heard the whole album.
Oh,
Because,
that is
I
such a Tony thing to say.
well, okay, because hear me out. I'm used to those, the big Petty singles, and they're very catchy songs. They're
Hmm.
rock songs. They're well written singles. He's an artist where I think his singles don't lack in quality.
I mean, he famously said, I don't know if he was the first one to say this, but he's quoted as saying, "Don't bore us, get to the chorus."
Yep.
Oh, so he was one of the people that said that. Okay. Well, and yeah, and I think he's got a point there with, seeing his work. I see how that mindset goes. And this was kind of hard to hear on first listen because, you start with The Waiting, which I think is a great song, but we've played it, a lot of times. I'm very familiar with it. So, hearing the single as the opener was, not unexpected necessarily, but, that was just something I had to keep in mind.
Right.
But, kind of just jumping into the album as a whole, you know, I feel like there's kind of like two groups of songs. There's kind of the rock songs and then the songs that just aren't as rock. And I don't think either of those, those two types of songs, I don't think one type was way better than the other. I thought this album was pretty balanced, I would say, which can be a good thing. Sometimes it can be not a good thing. But I will say that as I listened to it more and more, I started to appreciate the songs. I started to, notice details in them and, really grow to love them. That being said, I would say that, on the first listen, I think my favorite was honestly just Night Watchman. It's just very infectious. Love the guitar work. It's fun. I love the part where he like stretches out how he says a little smoke. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Is that a basic choice to, be one of my favorite songs off the record?
Well, I don't know, because if I'm remembering correctly, Chris, this isn't one of your favorites, right, from the album?
Correct.
Yeah,
Really?
There's something about it that doesn't, I mean, it's got like a funky riff and stuff and like a groove, but for some reason, it's just, I've never been able to connect, I guess, with a song or just like really feel for it.
which I do understand to a degree, because it's kind of one of those like kind of character songs.
Yeah.
It's almost like Spike, which I know Tony doesn't know, but
Oh,
which is
Lord, that's like my least favorite Tom Petty song ever.
because I just spun Southern Accents the other day. I actually, over the years, I've actually had the opposite take. Like, as not one of my favorites, but like I've enjoyed it more over the years, because it's just like. But I could totally see why you'd have that opinion, and I think a lot of people do consider it like a lower tier list of Petty songs. But it kind of has a similar vibe where it's a little funky, a little off. It's kind of about a
Mhm.
character he's singing about. Um, but
But
I can.
wasn't Late Watchman like also kind of written about like before they before they I think moved to California, he did actually work as like a what, it was like a grave digger or a
Yeah,
law
yeah, yeah.
person at the University of Florida working at night.
Yeah, that sounds right. Yeah, I do think that's true. But musically, I could see why Tony would dig this song, because Tony sometimes likes some of the oddball stuff when it comes to like an artist.
Hmm.
Like, um, I feel like Tony, like, another band you guys share a common interest in is Soundgarden, which
Hmm.
is a band
Oh,
I
you're
have
a
not been
Soundgarden
able.
fan.
Oh God, yes.
Love Soundgarden.
I was
Yeah,
fortunate to see them once.
Yeah, I saw them. There was like an opening show for like the Seahawks where like Pharrell Williams and Soundgarden were
Oh
playing.
yeah.
Yeah, and it was free. So I literally, my dad took me out of school early. We went and saw the Soundgarden portion, and then we left for the Pharrell Williams part just so we could beat all the traffic and whatnot. But um, No, definitely one of the first bands that really like made me get into like music and
Mm.
want to embrace it and whatnot.
Yeah, and I've been, and that's probably going to be a future episode we'll do. Is Tony will get you, or maybe you guys both. It'd be great to give me a Soundgarden album because I really only kind of know their singles, and the few times Tony showed me some of their songs, it's usually some of their more oddball songs.
Yeah, they
So
were like, I guess like the Rush of the Seattle bands, just like
Definitely,
good way,
definitely.
like
yeah, so
very odd time signatures.
I feel like that's I had a feeling Tony would like Night Watchman because it's definitely one of the I would say outliers on this album.
It is. It's like funky compared to like what they wouldn't do until like Southern accents.
Yeah, but maybe too. I also loved it because when I really got into Tom Petty, I got into their live box set, the live
Mhm.
anthology, and that's the first song on it.
That's right.
Uh, so I don't know. It's always been one of my favorites, but I could totally see. I'm not shocked when I see someone have a take that, like, oh, this isn't one of my favorites. So, but so
It's a
that,
simpler song kind of as a whole, but it's just the music is great in it.
Hmm.
And then also doesn't Tom Morello like go by the Night Watchman or something like that as part of his
Yeah.
like solo gig? I don't
Yep.
know if there's any connection there, but
Oh, I don't know.
probably not, but
but hey,
uh,
he was playing for Bruce, another like old school artist.
Hmm.
But
yeah, that's true.
moving on, another song that I really actually liked a lot was Something Big. I like the story of it. I like that it kind of started off kind of heavy in a way. Um, there was just something about it that I could really get into the groove and the that whole like little keyboard like instrumental break. I
Hmm.
thought that was fantastic. And that was kind of one of the songs where it had a lot of like nice moments in there that were kind of maybe subtle that didn't stick out so much.
Yeah, that's like one of the darker songs on the album and even in his catalog as well. Because you
Oh,
look at this album as like as the after effect of breaking through and making it and having that huge album with Damn Torpedoes, like, right, well, what's next? So it's almost like his react I don't know, I guess you could say like his reaction in a way to what happened after Damn Torpedoes. That's how I view it.
Yeah,
okay.
and for me, something big. I don't know about you, Chris, but it was a grower for me. Like,
Yep.
I think on first couple listens, it wasn't a standout track, but I enjoyed it.
Hmm.
But when I listen to this album today, it's actually one that I really look forward to. Like, it's like Tony said, it's there's something about it that's kind of like there's an atmosphere to it, and that
Right.
I feel like this song, a lot of it, I would say comes from Ben Montench and his keyboard parts. Like Tony was
Yep.
saying, the little instrumental break, like it really to me adds to the song, and um even the guitar work too. Like um I know both Petty and Mike Campbell like to played with 12-string guitars.
Hmm.
I don't know if that's one on this song, but it just gives me that kind of feeling, especially that opening chord where it's
Yeah.
just like, he's taking the pick and going across each string. Like it has a nice, really open feel to it. Um, and again, it's kind of like musically and lyrically, it's a little dark, and you don't ever really figure out what this something big thing is. Like you can only really
Yeah.
make assumptions, which I think is great from a storytelling aspect.
Kind of allows you to connect with it in your own way. Kind of forces you to connect with it in your own way.
Yeah, and I had a feeling this was going to be another one you liked because it's like, even though it's still a pretty simple song, like I feel like there's a lot of layers to it.
Yeah, as in most of Tom's songs. See, I'm just wondering, like, thinking about how, like, Tony said, like, what do you say? What he was disappointed, not disappointed in it
Yeah,
in the
he did
album.
say
Maybe
this
like
is
underwhelmed on
I
first
think
couple
part of
listens.
that has to do with maybe like the role of producer as well.
Okay.
So, like, this was the second album that Jimmy Iovine produced. So they had like the big success with Damn the Torpedoes, the first one. Like the drum sound basically paved the way for the gated reverb in the for the 80s. So I think with this album was there might be that struggle of Tom wanted to do something a little different from what they accomplished on Damn the Torpedoes, and Jimmy was more of the probably like don't fuck with the formula or whatever. So I think maybe that's why you had that like underwhelming feeling, is like those two like forces kind of like going in opposite directions.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
I
think
can see
that's a
that.
fair observation. I like for me, I think that was a big thing, and the production being not maybe as like 70s rock as I was used to with the Petty songs. It was a little more kind of that 80s little squishy sound. But
Which I will
yeah.
say too, like Jimmy Iovine watching the documentary, like he pushed the band to like their limits, especially drummer Stan Lynch. Like
Oh, Refugee was the big
y-
one,
yeah, they did. So I can't remember the number of takes, but it was
200 or something.
yeah, like,
Whoa.
and
Yeah,
he at points was almost like, it sounded like verbally abusive to Stan Lynch to get his drum sound to sound as tight as Jimmy wanted it to be, which I really,
yeah,
it makes that record sound as great as it does, you know. But on this album, it seems like it's a lot more loose, at least to my ears.
yeah. I think like Stan had that line, like he told Jimmy some like his place is behind the glass.
Yeah. So I can see, Tony, where you're coming with like the production wasn't as what you were expecting.
Right.
That said, I still think this album, if someone wanted to argue Dim Torpedoes was better, I totally understand it. I think Chris, you would make that argument. Um, that said, I do think this album is still leaps and above their first two.
Oh, definitely. I mean, the opener itself is
Yeah, I mean that's, man, the waiting is so good.
right. How he had like the chorus for so long that he just kept playing it and even annoying his neighbors.
Yeah, I mean, I wish I was his neighbor.
Right.
But
And then the version that in 2006 with Eddie Vedder is just
oh yeah, I don't know,
Oh
Tony, have
yeah,
you
yeah.
seen
incredible.
that?
I have heard that, yeah.
Yeah, that is so good. That actually, I think maybe that I don't know if I had seen that video before I got into Petty, but I definitely was into Pearl Jam before I had gotten into Petty.
Mhm.
And when I found that video, it was just like, I think I replayed it so many times that year that I found it on YouTube.
It's like Tom
Um,
said, you haven't heard the waiting until you hear Eddie Vedder sing it.
yeah, it at least back then in 2006, it fit his vocals like perfectly.
Hmm.
And yeah, that definitely helped make it one of my favorite Tom Petty songs of all time.
Right.
But Tony, as you listen to the rest of the album, what were some of the other songs that changed for you, either in a good way or in a bad way?
So probably one of the ones that I really was not drawn towards at first was a song like Letting You Go. I appreciate it a lot more now. But I think something that kind of, for me, Letting You Go and Insider kind of blurred together a little bit. Like Letting You Go is slightly faster, so when we got to Insider, it kind of felt like the same, but big drop in energy. Um, but I really do appreciate like the little guitar hook in Letting You Go, and I think like the organ throughout it as well. Um, and I think it has one of the vocal performances I like a lot on it from him.
Yeah,
Um,
letting you go. I don't know if it's based on from the documentary Rundown and Dream, but I don't know if that's about his mom because I think she was dying when they were making this album.
oh wow.
Oh, I think I want to say she already had passed, probably.
Yeah, it's something like that. She was either dying or she had already passed when he was making this album. So I think that song might be about her or as she was dying. It's my guess.
Yeah, that's a good, because I know a couple albums later with Southern accents,
Oh
the
yeah,
title track and the
itself, yeah.
bridge, yeah, specifically, he
Seeing her in
mentions
a
his mom.
dream.
Yeah,
Mhm.
but I can see where you're coming from, Tony, with those songs being the same, because those songs did kind of blur into the same song for me as well when I first heard the album. The biggest difference is on Insider, you have Stevie Nicks as a guest vocal, as almost like a duet, basically.
And I
Um,
actually quite liked her vocal performance on there with him. I thought it was very fitting.
I actually prefer Insider over Stop Dragging My Heart Around.
oh yeah, for sure. I'm in the exact same boat.
Agreed.
But this is gonna be a hot take. I'm not a Stevie Nicks fan, And one of the bands Tony and I were hoping you'd help us with down the road getting into would be Fleetwood Mac, because I only know the couple singles. I don't know like any deep cuts. And I got to say, just I've never been a huge fan of Stevie Nicks' vocals, but I feel like if I hear a whole album, it will change in the context of it.
Well, if you haven't heard Rumors, that's the starting point.
Yeah,
But
I have
really,
never heard it front to back.
I
Same.
mean, with Fleetwood Mac, it's like really like two different bands in a way from what they started as and then what they're known for. Because
Yeah, so
Adam and I did a listen of Fleetwood Mac. It's like they started as like basically another London blues band, and then with Peter Green. And then once he left, Christine McVie is basically the key to Fleetwood Mac and how they got the sound that they're known for. And then when they got because people give a lot of credit to Lindsay and Stevie for when they joined, rightfully so, but they wouldn't have gotten to where they are if it wasn't for Christine McVie and her vision.
Okay,
and
wow, yeah,
she
there's a lot I don't know about Fleetwood Mac that I'm just realizing now.
and she's the one that
Definitely
recently
started
passed
with
away,
Rumors.
right?
Yeah, she's the one, I think November.
But yeah, that definitely is a band that Tony and I want to feature, and them and Bowie. I've just never, but I feel like it's because I'm like not starting at the right place with Bowie, and so many of the artists I listen to are influenced by him that I feel like I'm missing out. And possibly the Stones, although I've always had a thing against the Stones. But one of my favorite bands, the Tragically Hip, they almost started off their career as a Rolling Stones cover band. So again, it feels like it's another band Tony and I need to give a deeper listen to and try to understand, because
Well, I like
I
a
know,
good handful of the Stone songs, but I haven't really heard an album all the way through.
yeah, exactly. So those are
Well, Patty
definitely
was a big
bands.
Stones fan, so there you go.
Exactly. Yeah. So I do feel like we need to get into those bands, but I will say Stevie Nicks, I feel like she works perfectly on Insider.
Yeah.
And maybe it's because it's a little bit more of a backing vocal approach than like a duet, I would say.
Well, Tony, do you know the story of Stop Dragging My Heart Around?
Rico, is that the thing you were telling me about?
I don't think I told you the full story, so we'll let Chris tell it, because I kind of I did mention a little bit of the backstory.
Yeah, well, yeah, let's hear this, Chris.
So she was working on her first solo album, Belladonna, which Jimmy Iovine also produced, and they were also dating. So that was being recorded the same time as Hard Promises, and Jimmy asked Tom if he had a song for Stevie. So I think he was going to give her Insider, but kept it. And then he's like, "Oh, here's another song that I started working on, but we haven't finished. It was Stop Dragging My Heart Around." There's a Heartbreakers version only on the playback box set. So he gave Stop Dragging My Heart Around to Stevie. They ended up doing it as a duet, and that song actually became the bigger hit for Stevie and Tom as well, and it prevented the second song on this album, "A Woman in Love," from being number one on the charts.
Oh, wow.
Oh, I forgot. See, I didn't know the last part, or if I did,
Yeah,
I
you
totally
definitely didn't say
forgot.
that part.
I think it was like in the Run Down Dream documentary, like when they saw each other, she was excited, and Tom like was kind of like disappointed. He's like, "Yeah, you kind of bumped us from being number one."
Well, and because I remember too, I told Tony from the documentary, like she like wanted to be a Heartbreaker, like she wanted to be a member.
Yeah, she had
Uh,
said like if someone had told you like leave Fleetwood Mac and join Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, like she's like, I would have absolutely done it, because she was a fan by like the second album.
yeah, and then I think Tom, said like, "Oh, no girls allowed," like in a joking
Right.
way,
I think she was always an honorary Heartbreaker anyway.
Yeah, because she would later join them on during concerts and do songs with them.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's like a concert in 2006 where she
Yeah, the
does like,
30th anniversary show.
yeah, I think maybe she does vocals too, like on "Don't Come Around Here No More." And
Well, yeah, she was on that in the album as well.
what I couldn't remember if it was just um if it was her, or if it was the singer from the Rhythmics, who I can't think of her name right now, but
Annie Lennox.
yeah.
Well, Dave Stewart wrote that for Stevie, but then Tom was like, I like that song. I'm taking it. I'm sorry.
So see, they really like. I like how they, would steal songs from each other. Like, but they were all cool with it.
Yeah, and I think she was in the first version of the apartment song from
Oh
the Southern
yes,
accent
yes, I do remember when that came out.
session.
Yeah.
And I think
Uh,
that's on playback, I think, as well.
yes. But yeah, I enjoy both Letting You Go and Insider.
Me too.
Letting You Go has a lot of like it's a little bit more like relaxed and like just kind of breezy, where Insider is like a little bit more dramatic, but like not in a bad way.
I know,
Um,
love the build up for in the bridge on Insider.
yes, yes. And um we also, Tony, I don't know if you caught on, but it's also where the album got its name from.
Yes, yes. Then
Right.
that's part of why I really liked Insider because like the bridge and where they say Heart Promises, those even on first listen did hit kind of hard.
Hmm.
Um and something that kind of like right now too that I'm noticing as I'm looking at the track listing, from Letting You Go all the way down to the closing track, it's kind of like, okay, soft song, and then let's throw kind of a rock song, a thing about you, and then let's go
Hmm.
even a little more serious with Insider, and then you go even more raw rock with The Criminal Kind, and then you go the biggest ballad on the album to close it. Um, it's kind of interesting how they kind of build up the rock song and build up the, I guess I guess I would call them more ballads as a very loose term.
Yeah,
Um,
looking at the track list, it does actually. I am a little surprised I never noticed that. Like the first side is very much just like, here are the rock songs, here are the couple singles, like, and then the second side, like you said, is kind of a mix between like kind of the more ballads and then the more upbeat songs.
Mid-tempo stuff, yeah.
and I think
Um,
that was part of why the album was kind of hard to get into is because I mean, I'm not sure how I would arrange the track listing, so I don't want to say that they could have, ordered it better. But I think the track listing kind of made it tough to, really get into every song.
Yeah, and like, and Tom was like very serious about track listings too. So I'm sure he definitely put like time in the order as well. Looking at
Now,
it.
I think Chris and I disagree with a little bit. It happens to be the closer. You Can Still Change Your Mind. It's a song that I've always loved, and over time I love more. But I also know it's also one of Chris's least favorite on the album.
What? Wait, well, okay. Before you guys say anything, Chris, I'm surprised that you don't enjoy it more because to me, when I first heard it, I
Mhm.
totally got Beach Boys vibes, like
Oh,
something maybe that Dennis would have done even in the later career.
Maybe. Well,
Um,
that was like like before I did like a full Beach Boys deep dive.
right,
But yeah, it's
right.
just something that's like, all right.
I mean, I love the chord progression, and I'm a sucker for a good chord
Mhm.
progression. So that really caught my ear at first. I'll say.
yeah, and I love like it kind of builds up, kind of like we were talking about with Insider, with like the bridge, which in the bridge of You Can Still Change Your Mind, you also hear Stevie Nicks doing background vocals, which I also think work perfectly for the song.
Hmm.
But yeah, I'm with Tony with loving the progression when it comes to like the chords of that song in particular. And it kind of
And
goes against what I said in the last episode of the podcast, where I said I don't love a ballad to end an album. Um, that said, Petty, when it came to ending albums where he would end it on a ballad, I loved it. Same, Best of Everything from Southern Accents,
Yeah, it's
one of
like
my favorites, and it ends the album.
I was just gonna like say too, he's typically done well with album closers. American Girl. I mean, come on now.
Yeah,
Louisiana Rain, Best of Everything, like you said.
Wake Up Time.
Oh God, probably my favorite Petty album closer.
Yeah,
Another
that
ballad right
possibly.
there. Another ballad ending
Yeah,
the album.
exactly. Another, but it works because it always just sounds so authentic.
Yeah. One more day, one more night off Echo.
Oh yeah, man, that is such an underrated deep cut right there.
Yeah, so he's had way better album closers than You Can Still Change Your Mind.
Yeah, so that's gonna be the difference, Tony. I think is that Chris and I, knowing the rest of them, there are better closers than You Can Still Change Your Mind. But I always loved it from first listen, and I probably heard I can't remember if I heard like Wildflowers before I heard this album, but I think I might not have been the biggest fan of some of his other closers at first, and then they had to grow on me. But for some reason, I always loved "You Can Still Change Your Mind," and I think it was one of the few songs that like I just don't know if they've ever played live. Um, Definitely was not included in any of their live vaults that they've released over the years. But I am a little surprised you liked it, Tony. I kind of thought this would be one you wouldn't
Really?
have liked. Yeah.
I mean, I'll say, I mean, I wasn't, a huge fan of the little like sound effect thing at the beginning, but like by the time you get to the end of the song, like, I become very invested in it, and it just ends with like that really pretty music that just kind of just naturally floats there. Um, and like I said, to me, I think of it kind of like a, kind of Beach Boy sounding, so that's a big plus for me.
It's
Um,
it's funny though you bring up the sound effects because I've noticed this with a lot of Tom Petty albums, and I'm sure Chris has too. Like they're always putting in, and I know you said you didn't like it on this song, but it's a little better on other songs. Like on a lot of their albums, there's little studio moments that they leave in at like the beginning of a song, especially. One of the most famous ones is the beginning of Even the
Even
Losers.
lose, yep.
Yeah, it's just the normal noises in here. You hear that right
Yeah, in
before
the
the song
album version.
starts. Um,
I'll have to listen out for that next time.
there's a ton of others. I easily could make a list. I can't think of them right now, but there's a lot of moments on Petty albums where there's
Run
like,
Down and Dream on the album.
yeah, especially
uh,
because on the,
for the
I think,
vinyl. Yeah. Did it for the CD, and I think just for the CD. And like, hello, CD listeners. It's come to the point of the album where you got to turn the record or the tape around. So did that.
yeah,
That's
I remember you mentioning that a long time ago, Rico. And I've always thought about how cool that was.
yep.
yeah. So they
Did
always kind of
also
did things like that.
I think he also did it on Into the Great Wide Open. I forgot what song it was. Like it begins with like
Oh,
either oh no wait yeah I forgot what song like ends with like opening a chest or whatever. It's like, oh, what do we have in here or something like that.
yes, I know exactly what you're talking about, but I cannot think of what song, but I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah, they always did weird things like that. Even like I think the beginning of like the song Billy the Kid too. There's like some weird like
It's
sound
like a
effect.
little tape thing or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's something I always like appreciated with her because like it just showed you like that Tom really cared about making it like an album experience as
Mhm.
opposed to just songs that they just grouped together.
And his like sense of humor as well.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Now, Tony, I'm very curious what you thought of A Woman in Love, because that was like the second of the other single, which Chris talked about with Stop Dragging My Heart Around. Is that one that you liked or didn't care for as much?
Well, real quick, I just want to say, as you guys had mentioned about like kind of like the studio noises and stuff they put in the tracks, that does make me appreciate that a lot more. About it makes the "You Still Change Your Mind" intro passable now, knowing that information. But
Mhm.
for a woman in love, when I first heard the song, I was like sick guitar work. The unison bends at the beginning. I have always really liked Mike Campbell's playing. I find it tasty. It's
Mhm.
got a healthy dose of classic rock and kind of blues in it. But when it came to the chorus, I didn't really love the little hook he does. Like the last time when he says "a woman in love," he does a little like vocal flourish on it. But even though I didn't like that, every time I heard it, it would be stuck in my head. But it is one of my favorites now, I think, off the album, just because I think the song has good dynamics. The verse contrasts really nicely with the chorus. Once again, it's real rock sounding, and I think it is a good follow up to the Waiting.
Mhm.
The Waiting, at least just musically, definitely sounds a little happier. But then A Woman in Love does bring on kind of just a more straight rock vibe. And in
It's got
fact,
that.
oops, go
Oh,
ahead.
go ahead.
Um, just kind of like how Rico mentioned, the first half of the album being a lot of rock songs, and especially after I heard the album once or twice, hearing The Waiting to Woman in Love to Night Watchman to Something Big, you have a mix of great rock songs. Watchman being a little maybe funkier, Something Big being kind of heavier, and it is one that I really do like listening to, and it does get stuck in my head quite easy. Now, it being a single and stuff, is it one of your guys' favorites as well, or?
My favorite on the album.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's probably top It's probably my third favorite on the album. It's up there.
I think it's definitely an underrated Petty song compared to like, especially for his singles,
Yeah,
compared to
because
like all the stuff.
it's
It's
it's not on the greatest hits album, the one
nope.
that everyone knows.
No, it's not. Okay.
Yeah, it's on some of the other, anthology ones or whatever, but it's not on like the main one. Um, it's one of those like I love when Tom Petty does kind of an angsty, kind of bitter song. And I kind of like compare it to later on when he did a song like Love is a Long Road.
Mm.
Like where the chorus is just him like belting it out. And it's just like, I don't know, there's just like a lot of power to his vocals, and the music never overtakes the vocals, but like it shines when it needs to. Like Tony said, there's a lot of dynamics, and like the approach of the verses and the choruses, like it's just like a perfect balance.
Yeah, just like beginning the song with that big hit on the snare and probably the floor tom, it just reminds me of how like a Rolling Stone begins, just that pow, like just gets you in
Yeah.
immediately. So you go big hit and then like right into the main guitar lick, and like I'm hooked already.
Yeah, which well, actually, and just when you start talking about the drums, it made me think back to Night Watchman. That's something I'm a little surprised you don't. Reason why you don't like Night Watchman more, because as someone who drums as much as you do, I feel like that's one of the better grooves on this album is Night Watchman, the drums.
Wait,
Oh
are
no,
you a
it is.
drummer?
Yeah,
Is that your primary instrument?
yeah.
Oh, awesome. That's cool. I didn't know that.
I mean, I always liked that about Night Watching, but just something about that song, I don't know what it is. It's just like I caught
um,
that right away, like the groove, like, oh, I like this. But
and then like that guitar lick comes in, and you're just kind of like, oh, like.
I like the guitar like too. I don't know.
Now I do think the album has like I would say two classic songs that weren't singles, which is King's Road and then A Thing About You.
Yep.
There's one out of those two, there's one that I really love. The other one I like, but the other one I really love. And I'm curious, Tony, which one out of the two you preferred?
Now, for me, King's Road is kind of forgettable to me. Like it feels like an all right rock song, but there's nothing that really draws me to it. There's nothing special. Like A Woman in Love, there's a lot of great details. I like a lot of cool aspects to it. But when I think about King's Road, I just think about kind of like a simple little song, which nothing's wrong with, and maybe I'm selling a little short. But I really like A Thing About You. That's one of my favorites off the album. I love the energy. I love the vocal performance. I like that it's one of the faster songs because I think a lot of the songs on this album are kind of like mid-tempo, whether they're heavy or not. So it was cool to get, to get the groove going fast.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, out of those two, Thing About You is probably my second favorite on the album. I probably like it just a tad bit more than A Woman in Love. I mean, I like King's Road a lot too, but yeah, Thing About You it's fantastic.
Yeah, I'd say it also like Thing About You over King's Road. It's just got like great chorus, like hooks you right in. Just like that opening drum rolling into the guitar riff. King's Road almost seems like he revisited it 10 years later on Into the Great Wide Open with King's Highway.
Yes. I completely agree. I've always kind of thought that same thing, and I think King's Highway is a much better song,
Correct.
or I at least prefer it. I mean, it's almost simpler than King's Road. Like that was one of the first Petty songs I learned on guitar, just like the chords was King's
Yeah.
Highway. But it's such a fun song to play.
Mhm.
But I just prefer that one for some reason over King's Road.
It's also a great driving song too.
Yes. But I Think About You is like, I think that keyboard breakdown near the end, if you guys know what I'm talking about, like
Yeah.
that to me. And Tony, this is a song you should listen to a live version. I know they always play one on Tom Petty Radio, but I don't know what concert it's from. But there's like one where they really draw out that part in the song, and it's like fantastic.
Okay, well, I'll definitely make sure to check that out.
It's probably on the live anthology. I can probably find you the version and send it to you. But I've always thought that was one of his most underrated songs. Like it's just so, yeah, it's like it's kind of like King's Highway, where it's like a nice driving song. Like it's got a very solid beat. I also agree with you, Tony, where I like how it's the pace of the song. It's by far the fastest song on side 2
I think
of the
of the
album.
whole album.
Yeah.
Probably on the whole album, but especially on side 2 where you have slower songs. But it's just so like, yeah, the chorus is just so undeniably catchy that I don't know how anyone couldn't enjoy at least the chorus of that song.
Right.
And it's, I don't know, it like I said, side 2 definitely has some of the more slower songs, but even
Mhm.
I compare it to like the Criminal Kind, like the Criminal Kind is kind of also like in a group of Tom Petty songs where I like, it's like the dirtier Tom Petty songs
Mhm.
musically. But I think when it comes to Tom Petty, I prefer his faster kind of songs like A Thing About You.
Mm.
So
So that
I'm
kind of brings us to talk about the Criminal Kind, right? That's the last one we haven't really discussed.
yeah. Did you like the Criminal Kind?
It is definitely my least favorite off the record. To me, now this may be a little harsh, but to me, it's the Maggie McGill of the album. Now, I can appreciate things about it. I do like that it's like you said, like dirtier sounding. I can appreciate the kind of lazy sounding slide, like played well, but it has that kind of like slow vibe to it.
I think like that
Um,
Stones influence a little bit.
yeah. No, yeah, that's a good way to put it.
But you're like actively um almost shitting on it by calling it the Maggie McGee of the album.
McGill, but
Miguel, yeah.
I mean, it's repetitive. The vocals kind of like they are kind of like a yell thing, kind of like Maggie McGill. There's kind of like the in it, you know. I wouldn't call it a bad song or anything, but to me, it's definitely the lowest point on the album, and especially when you sandwich it between two songs I really like Insider and You Can Still Change Your Mind. It just is kind of forgotten for me. It's not memorable.
Do you feel the same way, Chris?
Well, not memorable wasn't the right word, but go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, in a way, I guess it's like I have it like in my head, but it's like, oh, it's one I've never really thought much of compared to like some of the other stuff, especially coming after Thing About You. No, no, actually after Insider.
It's I kind of group it with his other songs that I again, for lack of a better term, I called like his dirtier kind of rock songs. Like
Yeah.
I kind of consider it like along the lines of a um All or Nothing or like Joe, which I know
Mm.
you are a big fan of All or Nothing. I like it, but I think you definitely like All or Nothing more than I do. Um Not to say I don't like those songs that I just listed, but I definitely kind of group those songs together when he does kind of a slower, but like very kind of for him a heavy rock song.
Was it All or Nothing or Joe that I like more than you did?
I think it's All or Nothing.
Okay, I was gonna say I really love Joe.
Oh no, I love Joe too. I like Joe way more than I like All or Nothing, and maybe that's just because Joe is like he's playing like a character,
Yeah.
But like I remember first listening to Joe, it really threw me off. Like I was so shocked by it, like his language he uses in the song and how abrasive it is musically. Um, where he does kind of a similar thing with All or Nothing, where he's like kind of telling a story, but musically, I don't. I sometimes have a little issue with the production of um,
Jeffrey
uh,
Lynn.
yes. Um,
See, I
I
thought it was Out in the Cold from that album that we disagreed on.
Oh, that one too. Yeah. But I over the years, or even over this year, I have
Mhm.
appreciated Out in the Cold more because I like the driving speed to it. Where All or Nothing is kind of a little slower, so
Yeah.
it's like a little bit harder to kind of get into.
Mhm.
Um, or even like Making Some Noise. That one's not one of my favorites either.
I thought you like prefer that one over Out in the Cold, unless it's changed for you.
It has changed. Yes, I'm sure
Okay.
I've told you, yeah, the opposite before, but it has changed. But some of the songs really on Into the Great Wide Open really took a long time to grow on me because until like the last couple of years, I never realized how great of a song Too Good to Be True is. That like that's a phenomenal song.
Hmm.
That one, and even like what is it? For what's the one that sounds like Free Falling? It's like the middle of the album. Like I feel like I'm such a bad Petty fan now. I can't think of the name of it. Like For All the Wrong Reasons or For All the Right
Oh,
Reasons.
maybe.
That one too is a decent song, but it took a while to grow on me. But yeah, like Criminal Kindness is a good song, but I feel like all of his albums kind of have a song like that where it's a little slower, it's kind of a little grimier. So unfortunately, Tony, if you get a Petty album in the future, at least I would say some of his albums, you're going to get a song like that.
It's not that I don't like the raw dirty songs in general. It's just I think this particular one didn't really do much for me.
I could see that.
So, but it sounds like you enjoy this album, but it took you a little bit to get into, right? Like fully.
Yes, and it's not one that I would necessarily listen to front to back often, but I feel like I would definitely listen to some of the songs from there a lot. I do think a lot of those kind of slower songs actually are really good. And like we're saying, some of the some of the really rock ones are great, like A Thing About You and A Woman in Love.
Mm-hmm.
So then maybe you would have liked Wildflowers over this album. I probably should have given you that because there are actually more slower moments on that album that are similar to the slower moments you like on this album. At least I think so.
I will say though, overall, I do like I like the band. I feel like I like the guitar work. I like the piano work and whatnot. Like I like the band.
The three of them had that chemistry since the Mudcrutch days, so that always helps.
Oh, three of them were from Mudcrutch?
Tom, Mike, and Benmont.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. I only know one Mudcrutch song because Rico and I used to play it, Scare Easy. But
yeah.
But okay, cool. I know he played bass in that band, right?
Yeah.
Tom did, yeah.
Yeah, and that's a good point.
And going back to about the live stuff, Woman in Love live is just fantastic. It has great Benmont piece, and then they just go into it. So you can find on like the live anthology, and they even played at Fenway Park on the 2014 Hypnotic Eye tour, and somehow they didn't play it in Hartford. I was a little disappointed, but
yeah, I didn't see it either on when they came to Washington. They also didn't play it on the tour, but I thought did they play it when you saw them the second time for the anniversary tour? No. Oh man, because I swore I saw it pop back on the set list. Yeah, that sucks. I would have. I will say they at least in their later stage of their career, they didn't always switch up the set list a ton like some other bands that we listen to, like Pearl Jam.
Oh, I know. It's like Tom and U2 are like the two groups I feel like they could have been more like Bruce and just
yes.
But it's just like I understand like you have so many hits and that's why a lot of the fans are in. So it's like they had to like be careful of like trying to have like a good amount of like hits to appease a lot of the people and then like enough deep cuts to please the more like hardcore fans.
Yeah, because when I saw them, they like played "You're So Bad," and I would have switched that out for like a ton of different songs because that never was one of my favorites from Full Moon Fever.
Right.
And I don't even consider that like one of his biggest, and yet he played it. But then I would appreciate it that he played when I saw him. He played "Hard to Find a Friend," and
you got that one.
To Find a Friend, yeah. I don't know why he decided to play it that night, but he did. He played it right after he did the acoustic version of Rebels. And that one was never in my top tier of Wildflower songs.
Yeah, because it sounds too much like Wildflowers itself.
Yeah, which then when we got the demo of it, the box set, you're like, oh, he's literally humming the melody over Wildflowers. But after seeing it live, it is now like in maybe my top 6 or 7 from the album, just because seeing it live kind of changed it for me a little bit. But
I'm trying to remember like what they subbed out Woman in Love for. I don't know if it was Tweeter and the Monkey Man that they played in place of Woman in Love when I saw them.
Oh, well that would be interesting because I have the Record Store Day vinyl. The second Kiss My Amps record. They included they included their live cover of Tweeter and the Monkey Man, which Tony, that Tweet on the Monkey Man is a Traveling Wilbury song.
Okay, I was kind of definitely heard the title. My ears perked up, and
And I don't know, Chris, correct me if I'm wrong. Do you think that was like Dylan's kind of attempt at like a Springsteen song?
That's the general like consensus of that, like the two of them, Tom and Bob, just having fun. Because I guess I don't know if it was in like that like mini Traveling Wilburys documentary where I think like George or Jeff Lynne had said it was like they really had nothing to do with that song. It was mostly Tom and Bob just like having fun with the Americanness of it.
Yeah, it is a fun song. That said,
It is.
would have much preferred to hear "A Woman in Love" live.
But yeah, so I'm looking at the two set lists, Hartford and Fenway. They definitely subbed in Tweeter and the Monkey Man for Woman in Love
Both shows.
for me. Like they're
Wow.
both in the eighth spot in the set list.
Yeah, I would have been a little mad. I get for some reason when it comes to concerts, I get very unlucky with a set list. Like I always go the second night instead of the first night, and then I miss out on all the songs I wanted to hear.
Mm-hmm.
Usually, when I saw Eddie Vedder on his solo tour, after your ukulele songs came out,
Yeah,
I went to the second night and I actually got my favorites that he didn't play the first night. But other than that, I usually always end up getting a set that I would have much preferred at like another city.
right.
But getting getting back to Hard Promises,
Mm-hmm.
um, I did say, I will say, Tony, I after I gave you the album, I kind of expected this response from you where you liked it and it grew on you after more listens, but it's not an album like Darkness on the Edge of Town that you're going to be listening to front to back many times in a row.
every week.
I understand the feeling.
No, yeah,
I,
when Chris got me into Bruce, it like, yeah, there was weeks where like all I listened to was Bruce album. Like I remember there was like one week in particular where I got into Born in the USA and all I could listen to was Dancing in the Dark for some reason.
Nice.
But we're definitely gonna have to do another Bruce episode for you, Tony.
I know. I'm waiting for the next one.
Well, Chris and I kind of want to give you his second album, but Chris kind of wants to give you Born to Run, and I totally see why. And I spun Born to Run yesterday, and I could totally see why. Because first of all, it's the album that came before Darkness, and kind of like Damn to Torpedoes was like his breakout success.
Big time.
But I don't know, knowing your musical taste, Tony, I feel like you'll like some of the oddity of his second album, The Wild and Innocent, more than Born to Run. But I don't know.
But I mean,
Just
did you expect me to, fall in love with Darkness to begin with, like to
no,
that extent?
no. I mean, my hope was yes, but and I did think that, and I do think that will probably be your favorite. Even if you go listen to every other Bruce album, I still don't see any of them topping that one for you.
Fair.
But I don't know. You surprised me by how much you like it. You might surprise me by how much you like Born to Run.
I mean, knowing Tony and how he's a Beach Boys fan, Bruce definitely channeled Phil Spector Wall of Sound style for Born to Run, which obviously
Ooh,
Brian did. So I think that's why he would like Born to Run a lot.
Yeah, that's a very fair point.
that does
Yeah.
sweeten the deal.
Yeah, so we're definitely going to be doing another one of those in the future.
And I have one last comment about Hard
Oh yeah,
Promises.
go ahead.
Is I'm actually surprised that you said this is what your second favorite Petty record?
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe if it's just because I feel like it's an underdog in his catalog, but there's something about it that's always just resonated with me.
And Chris, where do you kind of rank this in your Petty?
Maybe in the middle, I'd say.
Okay, so a little bit different between you guys then, but
Like my favorite, I probably Full Moon Fever is like my favorite Petty album. But if we're talking like Heartbreakers albums, it would be Echo.
Yeah, very underrated.
But then like Wildflowers is like right up there with those two.
Echo would be kind of an interesting one to give Tony next.
Ooh. I think so.
It's I think he would like the rawness to it. And I don't want to give too much away, but
Right.
you know exactly what I'm talking about. And I think he would appreciate that, because I will say, like, compared to Hard Promises is very smooth.
Yeah.
Even Wildflowers, even though maybe the subject of the songs are not super smooth, like it's dense, but musically it's pretty.
And from a songwriting standpoint, absolutely.
Yeah.
Wildflowers.
Yeah, but it's funny because I was going to say, well, that's probably thanks to Rick Rubin as producer, but which Tony and I have talked about a lot on this podcast, not as much as Brendan O'Brien, but he also produced Echo too. So, and I think they sound completely different at a lot of times. So that would be an interesting one to give him. So,
I will say that I don't think I know any songs from Echo, so
no, you wouldn't.
So yeah, so that would also be interesting.
Unless you heard it through Rico when he was listening, there's
a good chance of that happening, but I don't think him and I never covered any songs from Echo before. Where I know you know some Wildflower songs, Tony. Like I know you know, like You Wreck Me and You
Don't Come Around Here. Or no. Why did I say that? No. I didn't mean to say that.
You don't know how it feels.
Yes. Thank you.
And you probably know even like Honeybee.
Yeah, I know that one too.
Yeah,
Carl Wilson does backing vocals on that.
Oh, he does. Okay.
Yeah.
Which I don't know if I knew that until Chris told me that like an hour ago. Like I know he does backing vocals on Hung Up and Overdue.
Yeah.
Which you told me, like those are like the bonus songs, right?
That one is, yeah.
That one is,
yeah. Hung Up and Overdue was on the She's the One soundtrack. But I think for the Wildflowers and all the rest project, I think Petty had the engineer, what's the name? Ryan. I don't know how you say his last name.
Yeah,
but
I know what you're talking about.
I think he had Ryan boost up Carl's vocals a little bit.
Yeah, he did for sure. Even if they hadn't told us that, I think you can hear it different in the mix compared to the one that ended up on the She's the One soundtrack.
Okay. Well, I figured you knew that because it's right there in the liner notes for Wildflowers.
Yeah, it's it's a very different mix. But I've always, and it's funny though, because like when I kind of got more into the Beach Boys, even just like this last month, like I feel like Hung Up and Overdue, which I know Tony you haven't heard, but like even if Carl wasn't on that song, it sounds very much like Petty was deliberately trying to write a Beach Boys song, or like,
oh yeah, definitely,
melody wise, like vocally, it sounds so much like a Beach Boy song.
Something it would kind of like remind me a little of like the feeling of Feel Flows.
Oh, okay. Well, that definitely interests me then.
Something like that in a way. I'm trying to think like something between like Smiley Smile and the Holland album, like in that vein in a way.
Okay, and if I'm not wrong, I think didn't Tom Petty like go out and like say that he liked the Holland record in particular?
I think it was that one and the Carl and the Passions, I think.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, he did like liner notes in one like reissues of one of those albums, or when they did those two albums together, I think he might have done the liner notes.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's something where I almost want to, at least on this podcast, Tony and I, just like you, Chris, we very much appreciate the album format as like a form of artwork.
Yeah.
But like with some of these bands that like Tony's, still discovering, or me, even with like the Beach Boys, it's almost thing where it's almost like putting songs on like a playlist would almost be a great thing to do, because like it's like, oh, I want Tony to hear Hung Up and Overdue, but I also want him to hear something from Echo, like One More Day, One More Night. But then I also would love to hear Tony's take on Hypnotic Eye, because I think that's some of Ron's best bass work on any Heartbreakers
album. Lines, yeah.
Yeah, and Tony, his first instrument being the bass, I feel like he would appreciate that album so much. So we'll have to talk about that one day, whether instead of maybe doing albums, maybe we do like a playlist that, we curate or something like that. Because, we try to save these like first time listens to the podcast, but there's so many albums with all these legendary acts that it's kind of hard to we'd have to release like an episode a day to get through them all in a timely fashion.
Right. And tying into our two subjects today, I read, I mean, last week or 2 weeks ago, like some kind of story when after Brian was like freed from Eugene Landy and he was getting back with the Beach Boys. I had read something like after Carl had um worked with Tom in the Wildflowers period, and Brian had submitted some songs, and I don't know if it was like I think Carl like noticed how the way what however Tom was writing was like way better than what Brian had written and submitted to the group, that like I guess he like rejected like Brian's songs like for the first time in like throughout the Beach Boys' career. So
Wow.
yeah, so he felt like Tom was like writing better songs than what his own band was doing at the time.
I
Okay, well, that
mean,
really says something.
Yeah.
like I was saying before, maybe off air, like Hetty is still my number one, my favorite singer songwriter, and even
Whoa,
to
wait,
like,
really? I didn't even
yeah,
know that.
yeah, you were maybe out of the room when Chris and I were talking about that, but yeah, he is my favorite singer songwriter. Even if I like a couple bands more than him and the Heartbreakers, like I don't know, just even like on my least favorite Petty albums, like there's still amazing songs on each one. And like up until his passing, he was writing fantastic stuff. I mean, the last Heartbreakers record I thought was as good as anything else they had put out. And then even like the last album he did with Mudcrutch, which might have been technically the last thing that he released before he passed. I thought that had phenomenal songs too. So like I don't think there was ever really a decline in his songwriting. So that doesn't surprise me that, you know, not that I'm saying Brian Wilson had a decline, but I just think Tom Petty was one of the most consistent songwriters out there.
I will say, from I know I don't know nearly all of his discography, but a lot of the songs I've heard from him, there's a lot of really cool songwriting things going on that are subtle. Kind of the big one for me from this album is how the intro to The Waiting, it ends on an A chord, and then they do a build, and then they start the verse on an A chord as well. I think Rico actually pointed that out to me, and um, like that's such a small thing that is, but that as a musician, that actually really excites me, and it kind of inspires.
Right. And I think that just is part of Tom coming from that generation of like a generation that grew up in like the late 50s and especially in the 60s with the British invasion, like him, Springsteen, Billy Joel, like Elton John, just being like students and avid listeners of all the music that was being released when they were like teenagers and growing up. So I think that they learn from all those songwriters for their own stuff.
Oh
Yeah,
man,
I
let
always
me
love hearing musicians that you can tell that they've studied, not like gone to school to study music, but
Yeah.
they've studied records and really learned
Hmm.
them inside and out.
don't
It's
even get
cool.
us started on Billy Joel. This episode will be an extra hour long if we do.
Yeah, we'll have
But
to get together for a Billy Joel episode for
the three
something.
of us could probably spend 2 hours just talking about Laura, I think.
That's a discussion for another time.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, actually, there's one more thing I want to end the episode with, and Chris, I'll let you tell it. What was the special thing that came to about Heart Promises when it came to the vinyl?
So the story that I've read and heard was when they were working on the album in LA, I guess I don't know how accurate it is, but from what I heard was John Lennon was supposed to go to the same studio probably like January 81 to finish the songs that ended up being Milk and Honey, um because Double Fantasy and Milk and Honey, they were both recorded together, but Double Fantasy came out 3 weeks before John passed. So I guess the story goes that the band like found out that he was going to be going to the studio. They were excited, and then obviously it didn't happen. So when they pressed the vinyl, I think on the side one etching, like right before the label, there's a thing that says "We love you, JL" on there. So when I read that, I was like, I gotta find a copy of this, and thankfully Rico found one and sent it to me.
Oh wow, okay.
So thank you very much for that.
I actually forgot that. I forgot that I know I sent you a YouTube like single that I had found one time at a half
Mhm.
price bookstore, but yeah, I actually recently just got one of the remastered versions or
Mhm.
repressings of Hard Promises, and the new ones don't include that little um tribute
Message.
to John Lennon. Yeah.
Oh, that's a shame.
Yeah, so it's one of those things where it's like if you can find an original, even if it's beat up, just get it just to have
Yeah.
that for the sentiment.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And it plays fine too.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, if you can, I think my copy still played pretty fine, but I'm to the point in my collection where I'm trying to get like really clean sounding copies of, especially like my favorite albums.
Hmm.
So, um, but yeah, okay. So I think that wraps up this episode. It wraps up our album for album series for this month. This should hopefully be the second episode that you're seeing pop up today on your feed. And we got a lot of cool stuff planned for next month. Um, Tony, do you want to mention what we're doing next month? Just a little hint.
Yeah, we'll actually be discussing about my album I released last year. We'll be talking maybe about the process and some of the songs. We also may be mentioning something that is in the works. And we are planning to have on my good friend Bryce as well to join us. He is my drummer, and he's really helped make this album possible. And yeah, it should be a good time.
Yeah, and then besides doing a couple episodes on Tony's album, we're gonna try to do maybe a little episode where we review some new album releases, like the new Foo Fighters album, new Ben Folds, and the new Queens of the Stone Age record. So that'll come next month as well. Um, and yeah, we got some really cool episodes planned for the future. And just like I did on the last episode, I would advise everyone to go check out Chris's album that he released. You can find it in the link in the description in this episode. You can go and purchase it over at his Bandcamp. So thanks again, Chris, for joining us on these episodes, and we'll definitely be having you again on to discuss other bands and other albums.
I just want to thank both of you very much for the invitation. This was a lot of fun. Enjoyed the conversation that we had and learning some new stuff as well from Tony about Beach Boys. Love the insights from both of you on Beach Boys and Tom Petty, and thank you for the shout out.
Oh, you're
Yeah, this has been a
welcome.
blast. I'm having a great time doing this, and just like you guys learning tons. You guys really know your petty, I'll say that. It's been awesome.
Well, until our next episode, we hope everyone takes care and you will be hearing from us soon. So, bye bye.
Bye.